The polished wooden floors of Manhattan Dance Academy creaked beneath Mia's pointe shoes as she executed another perfect turn. Sweat trickled down her neck, her muscles burning from the 6th hour of rehearsal, but she wouldn't stop. Not when she was so close to everything she'd ever dreamed of. Beautiful form, absolutely beautiful, Jason's voice carried across the studio, deep and assured. He approached with that characteristic grace that made him stand out even among professional dancers. At 45, he still moved like a man half his age, his salt and pepper hair and sharp features giving him an air of distinguished authority that commanded respect throughout the dance world. Mia felt her heart skip as his hands found her waist, adjusting her position with practiced precision. Even after 6 months of their secret relationship, his touch still sent electricity through her body. "You're ready," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "Tomorrow's announcement of the lead role in Swan Lake is just a formality." She turned to face him, careful to maintain professional distance despite the studio being empty. Their relationship had to remain hidden. Jason was not only the company's principal choreographer but also sat on the board of directors. A scandal would destroy both their careers. "You really think so?" Mia asked, unable to keep the hope from her voice. At 24, she would be the youngest principal dancer in the Academy's history. Jason's smile reached his eyes, creating those crinkles she'd grown to love. "I know talent when I see it. You've earned this, Mia. Every grueling hour, every sacrifice, it's all led to this moment." Later that evening, as the setting sun painted the studio in amber hues, Mia gathered her things from her locker. The familiar scent of rosin and leather filled her nostrils as she changed out of her practice clothes. Her muscles ached, but it was a good pain, the kind that promised growth and achievement. A flash of movement caught her eye in the mirror, Emma Chen, one of the other senior dancers, slipping into Jason's office. Mia thought nothing of it initially. Emma had been struggling with her fouettes lately. But something about the furtive way she looked around before entering made Mia's stomach tighten. Mia lingered, pretending to organize her dance bag. 10 minutes passed before Emma emerged, her cheeks flushed and her normally pristine bun slightly disheveled. As she hurried past, Mia caught a glimpse of something in her hand, what looked like a private rehearsal schedule. That night, lying in her small Manhattan apartment, Mia couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that had taken root in her chest. She reached for her phone, thumbing through recent messages from Jason. They were all professional, carefully worded in case anyone ever went through their correspondence. But there was warmth there, hidden between the lines about technique and scheduling. Her thumb hovered over his contact. She wanted to call, to hear his voice and be reassured. But something held her back. Instead, she opened Instagram, scrolling mindlessly until she landed on Emma's profile. Her latest post was from 3 hours ago, a video of her practicing the very solo Mia had been perfecting for months. The caption read, "Sometimes opportunities come when you least expect them. #blessed #new chapter." Mia sat up in bed, her heart pounding. The solo was from Swan Lake, her solo, the one Jason had been coaching her on exclusively. She clicked through to Emma's other recent posts, and a pattern emerged. More late-night practice videos, all featuring choreography from the upcoming production. A text message illuminated her phone, "Jason. Tomorrow's announcement might surprise you. Remember, in ballet as in life, nothing is guaranteed. Sleep well." The words hit her like a physical blow. She read them again, and again, each time finding new layers of meaning, new possibilities for betrayal. Outside her window, the city that never sleeps pulsed with its usual energy, but in her apartment, in her heart, everything had gone very, very still. As she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, Mia didn't know that tomorrow would bring more than just an announcement. It would bring a revelation that would shake the foundations of everything she believed about love, loyalty, and the price of ambition. In the cutthroat world of professional ballet, she was about to learn that some dances were performed not on stage, but in the shadows, where every step could lead to either glory or destruction. The announcement hit like a thunderbolt in the still morning air of the practice studio. Mia stood frozen, her fingernails digging crescents into her palms as she watched Emma step forward to accept the lead role in Swan Lake. The other dancers burst into applause, their faces showing varying degrees of surprise and forced enthusiasm. Jason stood at the front of the room, his expression professionally neutral as he detailed the reasoning behind the casting decision. Emma has shown exceptional growth over the past few weeks, he explained, his words seeming to echo off the mirrored walls. Her interpretation brings a fresh perspective to the role. Mia felt Lucas, the company's pianist, watching her from his position at the grand piano. His dark eyes held a mixture of concern and something else, understanding, perhaps. He'd been with the company for 15 years and had seen his share of politics and betrayals. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of routine exercises and rehearsals. Mia executed each movement perfectly, mechanically, while her mind raced. She caught glimpses of Emma throughout the day, noticed how the other dancer seemed to hold herself differently now, with a new confidence that bordered on smugness. During the lunch break, Mia found herself alone in the practice room, going through the Swan Lake variations, her variations, the ones she'd spent months perfecting with Jason. The piano keys suddenly came alive behind her, and she turned to find Lucas playing her accompaniment. "You dance it better," he said simply, his fingers never missing a note. "Everyone knows it." Mia continued the sequence, letting the familiar movements anchor her. "Apparently not everyone," she replied, her voice tight. Lucas's playing took on a darker tone. "Jason has a pattern, you know. This isn't the first time he's made interesting casting choices." Before Mia could respond, the sound of voices in the hallway made them both freeze. Through the partially open door, she caught fragments of conversation. "Private rehearsal tonight, just to refine some details." Jason's voice. "Of course. I'll be there at 8, after everyone's gone." Emma's reply, followed by a soft laugh. Mia's chest tightened. She knew about private rehearsals, she'd had plenty with Jason herself, though those had started professionally before evolving into something more personal. The memory of those evenings now felt tainted, twisted. "You should stay," Lucas said quietly, still seated at the piano. "Watch the private rehearsal. You deserve to know the truth, whatever it is." That evening, Mia found herself crouched in the darkness of the costume storage room, which offered a perfect view of the main studio through its ventilation slats. She felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad movie, but the need to know outweighed her shame. 8 o'clock came and went. The studio lay empty, the last rays of sunlight painting long shadows across the floor. Then the door opened, and Emma entered, wearing a practice tutu and carrying a small bag. Jason followed moments later, closing the door behind him. What Mia witnessed over the next hour shattered whatever remaining illusions she had about her relationship with Jason. It wasn't just the way he touched Emma during corrections, touches that lingered too long, that spoke of intimacy rather than instruction. It wasn't even the whispered conversations she couldn't quite hear, punctuated by Emma's giggles. It was the moment when Emma executed a perfect sequence, the same sequence Mia had been practicing earlier, and Jason's face lit up with genuine pride. "That's my girl," he said, loud enough for Mia to hear. "You're going to make me look like a genius for discovering you." Emma preened under his praise. "You already are a genius. And so generous." She reached into her bag and pulled out what looked like an envelope. "I made sure those documents disappeared, by the way. No one will ever know about last year's incident." Jason took the envelope, his expression darkening momentarily. "Good. That's very good. We all deserve second chances, don't we?" Mia had seen enough. She slipped out of her hiding place, her mind racing with questions about what incident they were discussing. But one thing was crystal clear, this was more than just artistic favoritism or a simple affair. There was something darker here, something that smelled of blackmail and corruption. As she walked home through the neon-lit streets of Manhattan, Mia's phone buzzed with a text from Jason, "Missed you at late practice today. Remember, there's still plenty of time to prove yourself in the Corps. Some roles just aren't meant for everyone." The patronizing tone of the message, so different from his previous encouragements, made something snap inside her. She stopped walking, her reflection fractured across a dozen shop windows. In each fragment, she saw a different version of herself, the naive dancer who had fallen for her mentor, the betrayed lover, the artist denied her chance to shine. But in the final window, she saw something else, a woman who wasn't going to accept defeat quietly. A dancer who knew too much to be dismissed so easily. The question now was, what would she do with that knowledge? Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Lucas: "If you want to talk about what you saw, I have some things you should know. Some people need to be stopped before they can hurt anyone else." Mia stared at the message for a long moment, her finger hovering over the reply button. Whatever she decided to do next would change everything: her career, her relationships, her future in the dance world. The only question was, how far was she willing to go to expose the truth? The cafe across from the dance academy was quiet at this early hour, the morning rush not yet begun. Mia sat across from Lucas, wrapping her cold hands around a steaming cup of coffee. The pianist had insisted on meeting before rehearsals, away from the prying eyes and ears of the company. 3 years ago, Lucas began, his voice low and intense. There was a dancer named Sarah Mitchell. Talented, dedicated, reminded me a lot of you, actually. Jason took a special interest in her career. Mia's stomach clenched. What happened to her? She left suddenly, right before she was supposed to debut as Giselle. The official story was a career-ending injury, but... Lucas pulled out his phone, scrolling through old messages. "These are from Sarah. I kept them, thinking someday someone would need to know the truth." The messages painted a familiar picture: private rehearsals, special attention, promises of starring roles. But they also revealed something darker: inappropriate advances, threats about her career when she tried to distance herself, and finally, a complete professional breakdown orchestrated by Jason. "He gaslighted her," Lucas explained, putting the phone away. "Made her doubt her own abilities, her sanity even. When she threatened to expose him, he convinced the board she was mentally unstable. Who were they going to believe, their star choreographer or a hysterical young dancer?" Mia felt sick. And Emma? How does she fit into all this? Emma witnessed everything. Instead of helping Sarah, she used the information to her advantage. She's been holding it over Jason ever since, getting better roles, private coaching. Lucas's fingers drummed against the table, a nervous habit of a musician. But there's more. Sarah wasn't the first, and Emma isn't just blackmailing him about one incident. The morning light filtering through the cafe windows suddenly seemed harsh, exposing. Mia thought about all the times Jason had touched her during rehearsals, all the promises whispered in private moments. Had she been just another target? Another stepping stone in his pattern of manipulation? "Why are you telling me all this?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Lucas leaned forward. "Because you're stronger than Sarah was. Because you have something they don't expect, people who know the truth and are willing to help. And because..." He hesitated. "I've watched too many talented dancers get destroyed by this man. It has to stop." Back at the academy, rehearsals took on a different dimension. Mia watched Jason work with a new awareness, noting how he used the same techniques Lucas had described: the subtle undermining of confidence, the strategic praise, the creation of dependency. She saw it in the way younger dancers flinched at his corrections, in the nervous glances exchanged when he singled someone out for attention. During a water break, Emma approached her with practiced casualness. "You're taking the casting decision well," she said, adjusting her leg warmers. "Very professional of you." "I learned from the best," Mia replied, meeting Emma's eyes steadily. Something flickered across the other dancer's face: uncertainty, perhaps even fear. Just remember, Emma's voice dropped to a whisper, some things are better left alone. Careers are fragile in our world. Accidents happen. The threat was clear, but instead of fear, Mia felt a surge of cold determination. She thought of Sarah, of other dancers who might have suffered in silence. Of future victims if nothing changed. That evening, she met Lucas in the recording studio where he practiced after hours. The small room was filled with sound equipment. The academy used it to record music for performances and auditions. "We need evidence," Lucas said, showing her how to use the high-quality recording equipment. "Something concrete that the board can't ignore. But we have to be careful, if they suspect anything before we have solid proof. They'll do to me what they did to Sarah," Mia finished. "I understand the risk." As they worked on their plan, Mia felt something shift inside her. The pain of betrayal was transforming into something harder, more purposeful. She thought of Jason's hands on her waist, his promises of greatness, his careful grooming of her trust and affection. Each memory now served as fuel for her resolve. Her phone lit up with a message from Jason, "Your performance is suffering. Private rehearsal tomorrow night. For old time's sake." Lucas read the message over her shoulder and tensed. "It's dangerous to be alone with him now that you know the truth." But Mia was already formulating a plan. "No," she said, her voice steady. "This is exactly what we need. He thinks he still has power over me. That's his weakness." She typed a reply, "Thank you for the opportunity. 8 p.m. As she pressed send, another message arrived, this one from an unknown number, "I know what you're planning. Stop now, or everyone will learn about your own indiscretions with Jason." Not very professional for a core member to sleep with the choreographer, is it? Mia showed the message to Lucas, who let out a low whistle. Emma's getting nervous. She must suspect something. "Good," Mia said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "Let her be nervous. Let them both be nervous. They don't know what we know, and they don't know what I'm willing to do to expose the truth." But as she gathered her things to leave, Mia caught her reflection in the studio mirrors. Behind the determination in her eyes, she saw something that gave her pause, a glimpse of the person she was becoming in pursuit of justice. The question was, in fighting monsters, how could she prevent herself from becoming one? The private rehearsal studio felt smaller than Mia remembered, more confining. She adjusted the small recording device Lucas had helped her conceal in her dance bag, her heart pounding beneath her practice leotard. Jason was late, unusual for him, but everything felt unusual now. When he finally arrived, the familiar scent of his cologne preceded him. He closed the door with deliberate slowness, the click of the latch echoing in the quiet space. "Mia," he said, his voice carrying that same warmth that had once made her feel special. Now it just made her skin crawl. "I've been worried about you. Your performance has been lacking focus lately." She forced herself to meet his eyes, to play the role of the devoted student. "I've had a lot on my mind." "Of course you have." He moved closer, reaching out to brush an imaginary piece of lint from her shoulder. "Disappointment can be difficult to process. But you understand why I had to give Emma the role, don't you? It's about what's best for the company." "Is that what happened with Sarah Mitchell too? What was best for the company?" The change in his expression was subtle but immediate, a tightening around the eyes, a slight clench of his jaw. "Where did you hear that name? Does it matter?" Mia moved away from his touch, letting some of her anger show. "How many others were there, Jason? How many dancers did you build up just to tear down?" His laugh was soft, dangerous. "You're being dramatic, Mia. Sarah was unstable. Everyone knew it. Just like everyone knows about your inappropriate attachment to your choreographer. Imagine how that would look to the board." "You mean the same board that covered up your incident last year? The one Emma helped you hide?" The silence that followed was deafening. Jason's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, anger, calculation. When he spoke again, his voice had lost all pretense of warmth. "Emma told you about that, did she? Interesting. And what exactly do you think you know?" "I know enough," Mia bluffed, praying the recording device was picking up every word. "I know about the pattern. The private rehearsals, the promises, the way you isolate dancers who trust you. The way you turn them against each other." Jason moved to the stereo system, turning on music, the same piece he'd used during their first private rehearsal months ago. The irony wasn't lost on Mia. "You're forgetting something crucial," he said, his voice barely audible above the music. "You were a willing participant in all of this. Every private rehearsal, every late-night meeting, every touch that lingered too long, you welcomed it. Encouraged it, even. How do you think that would look to your precious Lucas?" Mia felt her breath catch. "What does Lucas have to do with this?" "Oh, please." Jason's smile was cruel now. "You think I haven't noticed your little conspiratorial meetings? The way he watches you during rehearsals? He's been trying to undermine me for years, using naive dancers like you to fuel his own agenda." "You're lying," Mia said, but doubt crept into her voice. She thought of all the times Lucas had been there, watching, waiting. How quickly he'd offered to help her. "Am I?" Jason moved closer again, his presence overwhelming in the small space. "Think about it, Mia. Who benefits if I'm discredited? Who's been passed over for promotion to musical director 3 times? Who's been collecting stories and evidence for years without ever doing anything about it?" The worst part was, some of what he said made sense. Lucas had known so much, had kept records for so long. Why hadn't he acted before now? "Here's what's going to happen," Jason continued, his voice taking on a reasonable tone that was somehow more frightening than anger. "You're going to forget about Sarah Mitchell. You're going to focus on your role in the Corps, and maybe, if you prove yourself trustworthy, there will be other opportunities in the future. Or what? Or I released the video from last month's fundraiser. The one showing you entering my office late at night. The one showing you leaving 2 hours later. How do you think that would affect your career? Your reputation? Your father's position on the Arts Council?" Mia felt the blood drain from her face. She hadn't known about any video. Hadn't considered that he would have evidence of his own to use against her. "You're just like Emma," she whispered. "Using people's mistakes against them." "No, Mia." His smile was almost gentle now. "Emma understood how the game is played. She adapted, survived, thrived. You're more like Sarah, too hung up on right and wrong to see the bigger picture." The music reached a crescendo as Mia backed away from him, her mind racing. The recording device in her bag suddenly felt inadequate, naive. She'd walked into this thinking she held the cards, only to discover she was playing a different game entirely. "Think it over," Jason said, moving toward the door. "You have until tomorrow's rehearsal to make your decision." "And Mia?" He paused, hand on the doorknob. "Don't bother trying to warn Lucas. He has his own secrets to protect." After he left, Mia sank to the floor, her legs no longer able to support her. The recording device had captured everything, every threat, every revelation. But now she wasn't sure who she could trust with it. The simple story of betrayal and revenge she'd constructed had shattered, revealing a more complex web of lies and manipulation than she'd imagined. Her phone buzzed, a message from Lucas. "How did it go? Do we have what we need?" Mia stared at the message, remembering Jason's words about Lucas's motives. She thought about Emma, who had turned survival into an art form, and Sarah, who had tried to fight and lost everything. The question now wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about figuring out which truth to expose, and who would be destroyed in the process. The fluorescent lights of the 24-hour diner cast harsh shadows across the scattered papers on the table. Mia had spent the last 3 hours reviewing everything, printouts of old emails, text messages, the transcript she'd made of Jason's recorded threats. But it was the newspaper clippings that held her attention now. Principal dancer suffers career-ending injury, read one headline from 3 years ago. Sarah Mitchell's smiling face looked up from the photo, frozen in time. Below it, another headline, Manhattan Dance Academy announces record donation following controversial season. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture more disturbing than she'd imagined. She pulled up the Academy's financial records on her laptop, public information, available to anyone who knew where to look. The timing of certain donations coincided perfectly with the departure of dancers who, like Sarah, had shown tremendous promise before suddenly leaving the company. Her phone lit up with a text from Lucas, "We need to talk." Not at the Academy. Somewhere public. Mia hesitated, Jason's warnings about Lucas echoing in her mind. But after cross-referencing the dates, she'd found something interesting. Lucas had indeed been passed over for musical director 3 times, but each rejection coincided with attempts to report misconduct to the board. She typed back, Central Park, near the Bethesda fountain. 1 hour. While waiting, she made 3 crucial phone calls. The first was to a former board member who'd resigned abruptly last year. The second was to a journalist who'd attempted to investigate the Academy's finances before being shut down by threats of legal action. The third was to Sarah Mitchell herself. Lucas arrived at the fountain looking agitated, his usually neat appearance disheveled. "You didn't tell me about your conversation with Jason yesterday," he said without preamble. "I had to hear about it from Emma, of all people." "You've been talking to Emma?" Mia kept her voice neutral, watching his reaction carefully. "She came to me this morning, claiming she wants to help expose Jason. Says she has evidence of her own." He ran a hand through his hair. "We can't trust her, obviously, but dash. Like I can trust you." Mia interrupted. "Tell me something, Lucas. The night Sarah left the company, where were you?" The question caught him off guard. I was at home." "Why?" "No, you weren't." Mia pulled out her phone, displaying an old security log she'd obtained from her third phone call. "You were at the Academy until 3 a.m. The same night Sarah's locker was cleaned out and all her personal belongings disappeared. The same night the contract she'd signed, documenting Jason's harassment, vanished from her lawyer's office." Lucas's face went pale. "You don't understand dash." "Actually, I think I do." Mia's voice remained steady. "You helped Jason that night, didn't you? But not willingly. He had something on you too. Something about embezzled funds from the children's program 6 years ago." His sharp intake of breath confirmed her suspicion. "How did you?" "I spent all night connecting the dots, Lucas. The missing money, the sudden generous donation from an anonymous benefactor, your unexpected promotion to head of the youth division despite lacking qualifications. Jason saved your career, and in return, you became his cleanup man." Lucas slumped onto a nearby bench. "I tried to make it right," he whispered. "Every time he targeted someone new, I kept records, gathered evidence. I thought if I could just find the right moment, the right person to help expose everything. Like Sarah? Like me?" Mia's laugh was bitter. "How many dancers have you helped only to betray them when Jason called in his marker? It's not that simple dash." "No, it's exactly that simple." Mia pulled out a USB drive. "This contains everything, the financial records, the security logs, emails, recordings. Including one of you and Jason discussing what to do about Sarah's evidence." Lucas lunged for the drive, but Mia was faster, dancer's reflexes taking over. "That recording would destroy us both," he hissed. "Exactly. Which is why you're going to help me. For real this time." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You've got something planned." Tomorrow's dress rehearsal, Mia confirmed. The entire board will be there, along with major donors and press. Jason plans to announce Emma as the permanent principal dancer for the season. It's going to be quite a show. Her smile held no warmth. Just not the one they're expecting. Emma won't help you, Lucas warned. She's in too deep with Jason. She already has helped me, she just doesn't know it yet. Mia stood, gathering her materials. The question is, are you going to help willingly this time, or do I need to send these records to the district attorney's office? Lucas stared at her for a long moment. You're nothing like Sarah, he said finally. No, Mia agreed. I'm not. Sarah tried to fight alone, with honor. I've learned from her mistake. As she walked away, her phone buzzed with a message from Emma, we need to talk. I know things about Lucas you should hear. Mia smiled. The pieces were falling into place. Tomorrow's dress rehearsal would indeed be a performance to remember, one where every dancer would be forced to show their true colors, and every hidden step would finally be brought into the light. But as she headed home to make her final preparations, a small voice in her head wondered, in her quest for justice, had she become just as manipulative as those she sought to expose? The line between revenge and righteousness was blurring, and she was dancing too close to the edge to stop now. The grand rehearsal hall of Manhattan Dance Academy buzzed with anticipation. Board members in expensive suits mingled with donors and press, their chatter echoing off the high ceilings. Overhead lights glinted off the crystal champagne flutes being passed around, a celebration before the final dress rehearsal of Swan Lake. Backstage, Mia stood in front of the mirror, methodically applying her stage makeup. Her hands were steady, despite the weight of the small device concealed in her costume. Around her, other dancers fluttered about like nervous birds, stealing glances at Emma, who was holding court in the corner, already dressed in the white tutu of the Swan Queen. Places in 5 minutes, the stage manager called. Jason appeared in the doorway, commanding attention without saying a word. His eyes met Mia's in the mirror, a silent warning passing between them. She gave him her best submissive smile, watching as he moved to stand beside Emma, his hand possessively on her shoulder. Lucas sat at the grand piano, shuffling through his sheet music. To anyone else, he appeared focused on the upcoming performance. Only Mia noticed his slight nod toward the sound booth, where a laptop was connected to the theater's speaker system. The house lights dimmed. Board Chairman Theodore Wallace stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. Distinguished guests, members of the press, before we begin today's dress rehearsal, we have a special announcement regarding the future of our company. Mia took her position in the wings, watching as Emma moved to center stage. This was the moment, Emma would be officially named principal dancer, cementing Jason's corruption for another season. But when Wallace's voice came through the speakers, it wasn't his prepared speech that filled the theater. Instead, Jason's voice rang out, crystal clear, you understand why I had to give Emma the role, don't you? It's about what's best for the company. The recording continued, playing their entire conversation from the private rehearsal. Every threat, every admission of past misconduct, every detail of the systematic abuse and corruption. Emma's face went white as her own voice joined the playback, revealing her complicity in covering up Jason's crimes. Chaos erupted. Board members rose from their seats, press photographers' cameras flashed rapidly, and dancers emerged from the wings, forming a ring around the stage. From the back of the theater, a figure strode down the center aisle, Sarah Mitchell, her head held high. Stop that recording immediately. Jason commanded, but his voice shook. We can't, Lucas called from the piano. It's being streamed live to every major dance publication and news outlet in the city. Mia stepped forward, her voice carrying across the now silent theater. There's more. Financial records showing mysterious donations coinciding with dancers' departures. Security footage. Emails. Everything. You don't understand what you've done, Jason snarled, grabbing her arm. But before he could continue, Emma's voice cut through the tension. It's true. All of it. She stepped away from Jason, tears streaking her stage makeup. I thought I could control him by keeping his secrets, but he just kept targeting more dancers. I couldn't live with it anymore. From the audience, Wallace stood up, his face ashen. Jason, my office. Now. You're going to believe these accusations? From a vindictive core member and a washed-up has-been? Jason's composure cracked entirely. I made this company what it is. No, Sarah Mitchell's voice rang out as she reached the stage. The dancers made this company what it is. And we won't be silent anymore. One by one, other dancers stepped forward, sharing their own stories of manipulation and abuse. The press scrambled to document every word, every tear, every revelation. Jason looked around wildly, seeing his carefully constructed empire crumbling. He lunged for Mia again, but Lucas was faster, stepping between them. It's over, Jason. The board has already contacted the police. As if on cue, uniformed officers appeared at the theater entrances. Jason's shoulders slumped in defeat as they approached. Hours later, after the statements had been taken and the press had finally departed, Mia stood alone on the empty stage. The theater felt different now, cleansed, somehow, though she knew the healing process was just beginning. Emma approached hesitantly, still in her Swan Queen costume. I didn't know about Sarah, she said quietly. Not everything. When you showed me those records yesterday, made me understand what he'd really done. You made the right choice in the end, Mia replied. That's what matters. Lucas joined them, carrying a stack of sheet music. The board wants to do a complete restructuring. They're talking about creating a council of senior dancers to oversee casting decisions. Sarah's been asked to head it. Mia nodded, thinking of all the changes ahead. The academy would survive this scandal, might even emerge stronger. But more importantly, the next generation of dancers would be free to pursue their art without fear of manipulation or abuse. The role of Swan Queen is open again, Emma said softly. It should be yours. It always should have been. But Mia shook her head. I think we need to hold proper auditions. Give everyone a fair chance. She looked out at the empty seats, remembering the young dancer she'd been just months ago, so desperate for approval that she'd ignored the warning signs. That's what this was all about, in the end. Not revenge, not even justice really. Just, making things right. From the wings, Sarah watched them with understanding in her eyes. She had lost her career to Jason's machinations, but her presence here, her willingness to return and face her past, had helped bring about the change they'd needed. The ghost light cast long shadows across the stage as they finally prepared to leave. Tomorrow would bring challenges, restructuring the company, rebuilding trust, healing old wounds. But tonight, in the quiet of the empty theater, Mia felt at peace with her choices. She had entered this battle seeking revenge but had found something more valuable, her own strength, her own voice, and a chance to protect others from the fate she'd nearly suffered. In the end, that was worth more than any starring role could ever be.